All right, let's bring in Noah Ohlsen, making his 7th consecutive appearance at the CrossFit Games. Finished 2nd last year. Noah, how you doing today, man?
Man, I'm doing just swell out here in California. Loving the weather. It's nice, cool air compared to the hot, humid Miami air. Same bright sun, but it's beautiful.
Oh man, and you are coming to us live from inside the bubble.
This is it. Call me Bubble Boy.
Yeah, which means you checked in. What's the process been like so far?
Well, we got in yesterday, Sunday, and got our groceries, got to the hotel. And honestly, thus far, it's been almost eerily quiet. Like, haven't really had any interaction with any CrossFit staff, just checked into the room. Today, we had to go get our COVID test off site. And then in theory, once we had tested, we were supposed to come back and start a 12 to 24-hour quarantine until we get the COVID test results. But between the three of us and everybody else watching, there hasn't really been any enforcement of that. So I think it's kind of just an honor system thus far of, hey, once you get tested, please go back to your room. There's not like somebody sitting in the lobby yet, at least making sure that nobody comes in or out. So it doesn't feel super bubbly. It just kind of feels like traveling to a competition and checking into your hotel like normal, but maybe as the week goes on, it gets a little tighter.
Let's go back to stage 1. What were your expectations going into those 7 events when you weren't going to be able to, see your opponents, really know what everybody else was going to do, and kind of just had to sell out on every event?
Yeah, I mean, thankfully, I feel like I'd gotten used to that training in isolation for the last, what has it been, almost 8 months to a year. So I finally had figured out how to like dig in and go there when I was training on my own and competing on my own. So I think that was a benefit to the whole quarantine situation that I maybe wouldn't have had if I was just kind of continuing to do my thing and train at a gym with other people. Fortunately, though, I was able to kind of team up in a way with Chandler Smith and Travis Mayer. And we did a little bit of a rotation as we did the events throughout that stage 1 weekend, where one of us would go first, second, third, and then we'd kind of rotate through who kind of bit the bullet on going first for the other ones. But in terms of expectations, I never really try to set any expectations. I feel like that sets unnecessary pressure on myself. I just try to go in with high confidence in my training and a nice, happy and healthy mindset, just really ready to enjoy the competition and do everything in my power to perform well.
And in the lead up, your coach, Max, got COVID, right? And was unable to be there for stage 1. So, I mean, did that affect things at all? What was the process like of maybe refocusing with the understanding that maybe your coach wasn't going to be there alongside you?
Yeah, he's actually here with me now. I don't know if you guys.
Oh, what's up, Max?
Corner. He's now COVID free.
All right.
And he's been to redeem himself and come out here with me for stage 2. But it was definitely interesting getting that text from him about a week prior to stage 1 kicking off. Just like bad timing, bad luck. He came down with a case of COVID, not sure where from. So he decided to quarantine himself for the safety of myself and some of the other athletes that were competing that weekend. But I felt like in the moment I had to process, like, all right, do I want to freak out about this because it could kind of feel like a big deal, or I could shift my perspective? And I realized that what I really needed him for was all of the training leading up to that weekend. And I had gotten that out of him. And then come go time, that was kind of on me. So I didn't necessarily need him there in person.
When you look back on the 7 events and the way you were able to perform, what performances or what results are you the most proud of from stage 1?
That's a good question. I would say that the 2 events that I was probably the least confident in, I had my 2, not necessarily best performances, but they were performances that were both PRs for me and kind of stood out. On the front squat, I hit a PR, 401 pounds. I've never front squatted 400 pounds in my life. So that was kind of a cool, like, landmark number to hit. as well as a sub 3-minute 1K row. Those were both like big boy numbers. It just felt like things that I've lagged behind on in the past. I was finally able to hang up there at the top. So I feel like I was pretty proud of those, even though they weren't the events that I won, such as the handstand hold, or I guess that was the only one I won, but I think I took a couple seconds in there as well.
Which one hurt the most? I'm curious, like which one, like, you know, you guys make, I will say, you guys make things look so easy most of the time. And, you know, I'm curious which ones actually kind of put you in a place where maybe you had to dial in the focus a little bit more, or you really kind of dug deep.
Yeah, for sure. All of them were tough. If I kind of walk through them one by one, the friendly Fran, that one hurt on like the last round and then for about 10 minutes afterwards. But in the middle of it, you didn't really feel it because it was still short and sweet. But that one messed some people up. I felt definitely the impact of it, but I wasn't like rocked. Travis, though, went outside and like threw up a couple times, was super shaky for the rest of the hour. But the one I think that got me the worst, the 1K had me laying on my back for a good bit of time afterwards. Front squat obviously didn't hurt too bad. The deadlift one wasn't too like painful because that was more of like a specific muscle fatigue type of workout. So it would probably come down to friendly Fran, the row. Nancy was pretty gnarly, naughty, nasty, whatever it was called, true to the name. That one also, though, I didn't really start feeling until like round, I think it was 4 or 5 rounds. You guys remember?
It was 5 rounds total. Yeah.
5. Yeah. So like rounds 4 and 5 is where I was like, whew, okay, I'm hurting. I'm breathing real heavy. And this barbell's feeling a little heavier. So you just got to hang on and keep doing your thing. And then, yeah, the Annie wasn't that bad. I just had a little bit of like a core explosion down in there. So that kind of limited me a bit. But other than that, the whole weekend was tough, but went well. So luckily I performed decently enough to get myself out here in the top 5. And that was
there have been some events that have been announced. I'm sure you've looked over them. What do you think so far about the second part of the test that at least you know about?
Yeah, what do we know so far? The CrossFit Total, the corn sack sprint, and the trail run, and then potentially 2007, whatever that ends up being.
And a handstand
I like
walk
everything
event.
So far. What's that?
And a handstand walk event for event 4.
I haven't even seen that yet. Was that?
Yeah. They haven't announced the details, but it was a picture of Christy Aramo upside down on her hands. And it was just a picture of her walking on her hands, and Dave said event 4. So
whoever
love that. And then Max in the corner over there just said something about toe to bar. I like those. We might be behind on our social media. Where'd that come from?
It's a 30, 20, 10 toes to bar, yards, walking lunge with double kettlebells.
Oh, that's one of the events.
It just
got announced.
It posted 1 minute ago.
Wow.
This is breaking news
on
here.
his stuff. They don't call him Social Media Max for nothing. They don't call him that.
That's going to be brutal.
Yep. That is, what is event 6? So it'll be the first day of day 2,
I think.
Yeah. All right.
Huh. Is that day 2? Is event 5 on day 1 or day 2? I wasn't sure.
I think event 5 is maybe on day 1.
I don't know.
I don't know.
I don't know either. I was thinking it was the opener of day 2, but
so he said 2007 would be on the 2007 workouts would be on day 1.
Right.
2007 includes a ranch trail run.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Okay, so that might mean 5 on day 1. So yeah. Well, with that update in there, so far feeling pretty good about everything. I mean, I think I've matured a little bit as an athlete, and I'm not thinking like, hey, I need to win every single event, and that's the only way that I'm going to succeed. I think that's the way I used to look at things. But looking at all of those events, I know that there are maybe a couple in there, especially potentially that last one that we just saw the reveal for, that I could win. But there are definitely some in there that it's not likely that I'm going to win. So on those ones, it's just like play my game, be a little bit smarter than maybe I would have been in the past. And instead of going out for the win and blowing up and taking last place, you kind of hang somewhere in the top to middle of the pack and that seems to fare better over the course of the weekend.
Speaking of the ranch trail run, one, are you going to wear pants this year?
I think likely not.
Because I think you were the only guy to wear pants on the.
Yeah, man. I almost never listen to Dave's scare tactics. Castro always, every single event, tries to say like, there are mountain lions in the trails, and there are sharks in the ocean, and there's probably going to be sharks.
Snipers will try to kill you.
Right. So for whatever reason, that year I bit on his bait, and he had said that there was like poison ivy and barbed wire and sharp this and that. And I thought, you know what? I don't want to spend the rest of the weekend with like gashes on my legs and rashes. So I wore the pants, but I don't think that it was necessary because everybody else that wore shorts seemed to be just fine.
And that was a tough event for you. Are you looking for some redemption on that ranch trail run?
Yeah, I think so. Max and I were actually just talking about it this morning after I went and did a little trail run out here. And that year, not only was I wearing pants, but I booked it right from the get-go. I think I was not quite as mature as an athlete yet. And so I like won the first 800, which doesn't mean anything. And I was one of the first ones to get, it was like a big flat portion. And then it got up to the first pretty significant peak. And I ran up that thing so hard, and I got to the top, and I was like, something weird is happening to my body, and felt that way for another 3.5 miles. So I think this time I will likely not do that, and hopefully be able to maintain a pace that is a little bit smarter from the start. Maybe I think everybody is going to start out at a faster pace than they're going to hold for the whole run. It's just like in our nature to open up a little quickly, but hopefully I'll have the control to like settle back into something that makes more sense to maintain for whatever the distance is, rather than having to suffer through 4 miles of like already being exploded.
You mentioned the word and maturity, that you're a more mature athlete. Was there a moment that you can go back in your career and say, you know what, that was the moment where I decided that I've got to change the way I approach things? And if so, then what did you do about it?
Man, that's a great question. I'm sure if I had a little bit more time, I could pinpoint exactly when it was, but there's nothing that jumps out at me right now. I think it's accumulation of all of those. Man, Adam Neefer is so nice. Neighbor. Thanks, neighbor. We're good. He just texted me they're going to the store and asked if we need anything.
Good dude.
But yeah, I think that it was accumulation of those events where I wasn't very smart, and it impacted me strongly in a negative way that made me realize, all right, maybe I should approach this a little bit differently, because the way that I've been doing it so far hasn't really worked out in my favor. And
to be fair, relatively hasn't worked out in your favor, because you were still performing at a very high level at the CrossFit Games. But
right.
That maturity ultimately led to you last year making it onto the podium, getting that CrossFit Games medal that you so coveted for so long. And we got to have a great, chat with you shortly afterwards. But I'm kind of curious on how now, with a full year separating that, maybe how is your personal view of yourself, and maybe the self-esteem as an athlete kind of changed since being able to kind of put that accomplishment in the rear view as far as like finally attaining that?
Yeah, that's something that Max and I were also talking about this morning, ironically. And I think that a lot of people, once they've accomplished something like that, there are like a few different ways that their lives can go after that. There's either I can't remember what the specific term for it is, but where it's not all that it's cracked up to be. You finally achieve your goal and you're like, man, this wasn't as like powerful or impactful as I thought it was. And was it worth all of that hard work? Or for me, it could have been the perspective of, man, it was so close, I almost won, rather than celebrating second, I could have been eating myself at what could I have done to have taken first. And so I tried to consciously celebrate the fact that I had made the podium. And I think that has given me a little bit more confidence throughout this season, that if I do play my game a little bit smarter, that I do have the capacity to do very well and to be at the top of our sport, which is something that I've wanted for a very long time.
And so I'm kind of curious, where does that, like in this moment now, kind of leaves you? Because there's like, we've both played sports a ton, and I feel like there's something to the saying of like acting like you've been there before, and then knowing that you have.
Mm-hmm.
And now that you've been there, is like, even in these lead up stages, because we're right on the doorstep of the games now. If you're thinking about Noah Ohlsen in 2019 at this point, but like, what is the biggest contrast between the two?
I don't know. That's a good question. I think I learned a lot just in competing last year about how to compete, and how I would approach being out on the competition floor and just keeping myself in a better headspace. I don't know if this is directly answering your question, but it's just the way that my brain kind of took me. I think that I used to anticipate these competition weekends and be eager for them to be over before they even began, just because of the amount of pressure that it was and that I would put on myself. And now, having experienced last year a headspace where I was able to really try to like zoom out and enjoy the competition, and I did. I was just rereading my journal, like, so grateful that I finally was able to like soak this all in and enjoy the fact that I'm out here competing and the opportunity that I have to do this cool thing. I think when I can put myself there, I tend to perform a lot better. And that's not the way it used to feel for me. It used to feel like you have to win, otherwise you're never going to reach. And it was just all of that, like, really anxious build up pressure, self-talk.
We've talked to a lot of athletes who basically say the same thing. Once I learned to sort of forget about expectations and learn to just really enjoy the process, I started performing a lot better. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious why kind of so long to get to that point when it's pretty clear that that mindset works.
Yeah, I don't know. And I wonder, now that you say that, it makes me think of my next door neighbor here, Justin. Like, I wonder if he's figured that out yet, or if he will happen to feel a little bit of that or go through that learning curve himself.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's interesting. It has panned out where the more you enjoy it, the better you do, I think, for the most part.
And I'm curious, because you seem like, just from a personality perspective, you seem like someone that generally enjoys life and the day to day. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
curious if that was a theme that maybe carried over from sports in the past, whether it was water polo or anything like that, or is this something that was relatively unique for CrossFit?
I think it was new, and now that you mentioned that as well, being such like a happy-go-lucky guy most of the time, when I would start to get these really anxious feelings surrounding a competition, it would almost stress me out even more, because I would recognize, like, hey, this is not me. I don't feel like myself. This doesn't feel good. I want to get out of this feeling, and it wouldn't be over until the competition was over. So it kind of snowballed itself. Now that I have matured a little bit, I know I keep using that word. I don't know if it's the right one, but as I've grown and experienced that a few times, I've been able to just recognize, like, hey, this is just something that happens. The week before a competition, you get a little nervous. In a week, you're going to be fine. Just do your thing. What's going to happen is going to happen. And that's it. And that just makes me feel a little bit better about it.
What have you been focusing on as far as your training is concerned these past couple of weeks?
Yeah, it was such a short time frame from stage 1 to stage 2. I remember I held up my hand at the end of stage 1, and I was like, all right, we've got 4 weeks until the games. The week after stage 1 is going to be a little bit of a deload, and the week before the games is probably going to be like a taper week. So that leaves you 2 weeks there in the middle to really get after it. And I think that we did a pretty good job of balance between everything. We did a prep camp, myself and 4 other guys up at Training Think Tank, that Max put together. And I think we did a really good job of simulating what this weekend might feel like. And there were a few things there that stood out, were like a heavy sled push. I had, a bit of trouble with. And so we put a few more of those in this past week. We did heavy Karen. That wasn't my favorite workout. So we did a good handful of heavy wall balls. But in general, obviously, we know we're going out to the ranch for the trail run. So we've been doing a good amount of trail running in Miami, what's available down there. There's a couple bridges as well that we've had to utilize to simulate a mountain. But I feel good. And again, I was just saying to Max yesterday, we've obviously been chatting a lot, being roomies out here in quarantine, but I feel very well-rounded in my fitness right now. I don't think, like, there are periods of time where I'm like, man, I'm really strong right now, or I'm really gymnastic CrossFit fit. But right now I just feel like I'm pretty good at everything across the board. And hopefully it's a good, well-rounded test that allows me to succeed.
Well, well-rounded is something you definitely want to hear in this sport for sure. One kind of switching gears a little bit. The one side I think that some people don't hear about a ton from the athletes, but they see is the media aspect, is in managing media and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
You've been featured on the Buttery Bros vlog, which is always a blast to see. And in managing that social media presence, the more, I guess, forward-facing aspect of being an athlete. What is that like for you? And is there maybe a philosophy or anything that you kind of carry in terms of how you approach that and say yes to certain things or no to certain things in managing?
Yeah. There's definitely a bit of a balance, especially when it gets closer to competition time for me. I noticed that if there are a lot of distractions and like just having to coordinate extra things the week before going out to the games can feel a little bit more stressful. So there are things that you do say yes to because it feels like it's worth it, or something that is kind of an expectation or an obligation. And then there are things that maybe are like, now's just not a really good time for that. Let's wait until after. But interestingly enough, this week leading up to the actual competition time, we've got so much free time, downtime. Monday, Tuesday, in theory, we're supposed to be just kind of quarantine, hanging out in our hotel room. Wednesday, we've got orientation. Thursday is another free day. So I've had a couple little asks, and normally I think I would shut it down, but I said, you know what? I'm cool. On Monday, I'll be in a hotel room for 24 hours. So if you need me to post this or this, like, I'll take care of it. And I don't feel like that is like an overwhelming distraction for me. I feel like I have a pretty good relationship with being able to do what I need to do from a business perspective, and then kind of shutting it off and not like living and dying by the gram.
Something we've asked some of the other athletes is what needs to happen Friday, Saturday, and Sunday for you to be able to look back on your experience at the CrossFit Games and say, okay, that was a success?
I think just being smart. And like last year, I didn't feel like I had any blowout negative performances at the games, and I had a couple blowout positive experiences. So that's like best case scenario. Last year played out really, really well. If that could happen again, that would be amazing. That would be ideal, right? Where I capitalize and have some great performances on the ones that in theory I should be able to, and then just play it smart and maybe don't explode on some of the other ones. So I think in retrospect, if I finish the weekend, and whether it's first, second, or third, I don't want to look much beyond that, and I know that I performed well. I didn't make any major mistakes. I know that I trained really hard leading up, so I don't have any regrets there. It just kind of comes down to execution and playing my game. If I can do that at the end of the weekend, I think I'll be satisfied. I'm just grateful that we have the opportunity to compete. That's another like perspective shift that I've forced myself to have. Like, there are a lot of other guys that are my fellow competitors that don't have this opportunity. So I just want to take advantage of it and appreciate the fact that we get to go and do this.
One last question for you. This is your 7th consecutive trip to the games. I mean, you're still a very young man, still very fit.
I don't know about that. Getting up there.
You're starting to, you have a family that you might be starting sometime soon. Do you start thinking about, when am I going to be done with this, or how much longer do I want to do this? And then if so, how do you deal with that?
Mm-hmm. It's definitely a consideration. I'm 29 now, and for the most part, you haven't seen many guys compete very successfully. Obviously, there are a few outliers, but beyond 30. And I think that that's going to change, especially the way that I feel now and the way that some of my peers are performing at the ages that they are. Myself, Matt, Pat, Cole Sager, Will Morad, Travis Mayer, like all of us kind of came in at the same time in 2014. All of us are probably anywhere from 28 to 31 years old, and I feel like are not out yet. So I think that you will see a pretty successful run of a handful of guys being able to be competitive 30 plus. And for me, if I can take it to 10 consecutive CrossFit Games, that's just kind of an arbitrary number that I set as a goal for myself. I think that would be really cool. I feel better at 29, I think, than I expected to. If you would have asked me a few years ago at 29 if I would be at the peak, I wouldn't have thought so, but I really do feel awesome, knock on wood, and hopefully can keep going for a good bit of time longer and performing well. That's kind of like, I say it now, but I think that's the cutoff for me. If I still qualify for the games at 32, but kind of hanging at the back of the pack, I don't think that would feel so good. And I wouldn't want to subject myself to training the entire year for that, but we'll have to see when we get there.
Well, Noah, listen, man, thank you so much for taking the time out of your bubble day to talk with us. It's always a pleasure doing this with you, and we wish you the best of luck in stage 2. It's going to be a lot of fun watching you compete.
Thanks so much, guys. I appreciate you. Good chatting with you as well. And maybe I'll see you out here from a distance.